Hey, I want to show you how to get north without the use of a compass. There are a variety of ways to do it. I've spent a lot of time out in the backcountry, and I feel very strongly about always having a map and compass with you. But sometimes things happen. You know, the compass breaks, the map gets washed out. You should always have a backup plan. When you are in a disaster, you might not have the luxury of having a compass with you. So there are a variety of things that you can do. The first one I want to show you involves a stick in the sun. The kicker is you want to make sure that you've got a really good sunny day, one that's going to drop a shadow for you, especially using a stick. If you're in a disaster, you've got access to just about anything. Really, the only variable that you want to keep in mind is that you want it about 3 foot tall. Like I said, you're out in the backcountry or in a disaster, you can use like a piece of PVC, stick, just about anything that's accessible to you as long as it's straight. In the backcountry, I'm going to be more apt to use a stick. What you're going to do is you're going to find probably one of the straightest things that you can, and you're going to set it in the ground. I am about 5'5". I already broke this off, but I'd break this off at about waist height for me. That's going to be 3 foot. So I'm going to put that in the ground, kind of as straight as I can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it. I'm going to take, part of the reason you've got the 3 foot is that it's going to be a consistent measurement all the way across. So what I want to do is I want to mark where the end of the shadow is. So I'm going to put, like here, because I've got them, I'm going to put a rock right here, and I know that this is going to be the end of that shadow. The other thing that you want to do when you're doing this one is remember that your first shadow is west. It will always be west. So if you need to, put a W so you remember. And the thing with this method is it's going to take you about 15-20 minutes. There's a variation on this if you want to get even more precise, but it's going to take you a good half a day. And if you've got the time, great. You do the same thing, mark your first shadow, and then you're going to create an arch, and you're going to go halfway. But on this one, like I said, this is going to be about 15-20 minutes. So while we're waiting for the sun to do its thing to give us our next shadow, I'm going to go on to the next, another alternative that you can use. My personal preference is the watch method. I always carry or wear an analog watch. I don't do the digital, I do an analog, because if push comes to shove, I can get a north bearing using a watch, just a regular watch. The first thing that you do with the watch is you're going to line up your little hand to the sun. The bonus to this method, especially if you're in the northwest or where it's not very sunny, you can actually usually tell where the glow is of the sun. So I'm going to take and I'm going to line that number 2 up to the sun. And I'm going to take and I'm going to count the difference between wherever the little hand was to the 12. So in this case it's the 2, so that's going to be a 10-hour difference. Remember, you've got the half, so you've got this variable that we'll talk about here when I show you how to do it. So the difference between the 2 and the 12 is 10 hours. You take that difference and you split it. So that's going to be 7, right? it's 5, half of 10 is 5. Add that to the 2, I get 7. Now we're at 230, so I know it's going to come off that 7 a little bit. So when I drop the watch back down, I line it back up to the 2, I do my difference, and I know the direction of the 7 is going to be north. Now I want to drop this with my compass to give you an idea of just how accurate you can get using this method. Here's your 7, so it's going that direction. There's your north. I could rotate my dial so that you guys aren't going, but that says south. That is actually the north. Now, something that you want to do if you actually have a compass with you, get outside your truck. Walk away from your rig, because metal will mess with your compass. A lot of people aren't aware of that. We were playing with this a little bit, If you have electronic equipment, walk away from your compass. Watch the dial here as I bring it around. That's just a cell phone being on. I can totally mess with where the magnetic north is going to be. So you're going to want to remember that if somebody's got their cell phone turned on, you might want to turn it off or hand it to somebody else. The other thing that you want to do, especially with this method, you're in the woods, you're at a disaster, take your bearing, don't walk yet, take a look at what is in the distance. Walk to that spot, stop, take another bearing. Keep doing that. That'll keep you in more of a true north pattern. Remember that what we're doing is more of the magnetic north. You don't have the option of the declination. Like I said, this one is one of my favorites. Another one that I want to show you involves a needle and water. I also always have, when I'm out in the woods, I actually always have a silk scarf with me. I do that for a variety of reasons. Primarily because silk will keep me cool during the heat, and it'll keep me warm, and it dries really fast. The other thing that I can use it for, other than a mask over my face, is I can magnetize a needle with this. When you're magnetizing a needle, the key is always going the same direction, and you want to use it on silk. You actually need the silk. Kind of as a weird side note, you can do something like this using a straight razor, you know, the kind that they've got the edges on both sides and then they've got the hollow. You can hook that up to a string. Be careful if you ever do this one, because you can actually magnetize the razor with just using the palm of your hand. Switch it in one direction. Just, again, be very careful so now you don't have another emergency going on. But you also need a string. You can also do this one using a string. I personally am not a fan because there's too many variables that are outside of your control, namely the wind, and then where the string lies. If you were to magnetize it, tie a string on there, and then let it dangle, it should move you to north. So if you got a bottle of water, or you find a mud puddle, perfect. You find a dish of some sort, perfect. Again, use whatever you have available to you, but I'm thinking most people are going to be carrying a bottle of water. So I'm going to go ahead and magnetize this. I'm moving it the same direction each time. Be careful that you're not rubbing it back in. So I come out, magnetize. It's not going to matter which end. Like I'm doing it towards the eye of the needle. It doesn't matter which direction. Just make sure it's the same direction. Something else that you want to remember with this method is, a lot of people will think, ooh, the bigger the leaf, the better. Not necessarily true. I go for the more smaller ones. You can actually use a piece of grass if you want. I had taken some off, but I'm going to show. If I use even this little leaf that I just plucked, I drop it in the water. I'm going to turn it a different way, because we know that's north. I hate this part. I always tend to drop it into the water. And we're going to let that move around. There's a slight breeze. It's not real bad. Relatively straight or flat. There's your north. You see that? So that's another method. I would probably do this one a couple of times just to make sure, take a note of where it is and mark it. And then I'd probably try using just a different leaf, just because, I mean, this one works great in a pinch, but I'm still, for myself personally, more of a fan of the watch one. That just seems to be the most consistent that I've found. Something else that you want to keep in mind, especially in a disaster, again, you might have a map with you, but more than likely the map will no longer be accurate, especially if you're in an earthquake zone. Nothing is going to look the same, not a single thing. You can actually create your own map. If you get to a high point, take a note of what's around you, jot it down on a piece of paper. Something that I always carry with me is one of those mini notebooks with a piece of paper in my back pocket when I'm out. And so I always have access to a piece of paper and pen. Mark down where everything's at. You can do a rough bearing, mark north on your little map. Go to the next spot. Do the same thing, mark it down. Something else that you want to keep in mind, I can look one direction, it looks one way. Turn around and look at where you were, because I guarantee you it's going to look different. If you have to go back, at least you have a way of going back. So we've got probably another 10 minutes. We're going to go ahead and shut the camera off, give it another 10 minutes, and through the magic of on and off, we'll come back on and you can see what works with the 3-foot stick.